Hello, my name is Lewis and welcome to Gathering the Magic. Today we're looking at the top 10 best Golgari commanders in MTG. Starting off the list, fresh from Strixhaven, we have Dina, Soul Steeper. Dina is a 1/3 Dryad Druid that says whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So straight away, whack in all those creatures that ETB and give you life, have triggers to give you life, and maybe even give you life when they leave the field. I won't talk too much about Dina as we did drop a deck tech on the channel last week, so go check that out if you haven't already. Cram your deck with all those enchantments, artifacts, sorceries and more that will constantly keep you topped up with life so you can constantly ping your opponents in the face for all that deadly damage. Whether you want to go the food route like we did or beefing up Dina so you can use that second ability to smack enemies in the face, the options are plentiful, which is why this commander was chosen as one of the best Golgari commanders by our followers on Instagram. Before we get on to the number 9 slot, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for all things MTG. Check out our link tree too, that has all of our social media and affiliate links. Next on the list we have Grismold, the Dreadsower. From Commander 19, this 3/3 troll is all about the plants. Grismold is a 3/3 with trample that says at the beginning of your end step, each player creates a 1/1 green plant creature token, and when a creature token dies, put a 1/1 counter on Grismold. So part 1 of this plant party plan is to have tons of ways to create tokens. The more tokens you have, the more chances to beef up Grismold. Then part 2 is to have all those ways to remove those tokens, getting loads of those sack outlets, and particularly in black, there are plenty of cards and creatures that give other creatures -1/-1. Perfect, as tokens are usually very weak, and that'll be sure to see them away. And of course, invest in that copy of the Ozolith. Have those options to redistribute those counters if Grizzly bites the dust. This is a fantastic commander and one that, dare I say it, I'd love to make a deck around one day. Next on the list we have Masarek Crow, Death Priest. Masarek is a 2/2 insect shaman with flying that says whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a 1/1 on each creature you control. So get in all those cards that will be super pro sacrifice. Cards that allow you to sacrifice, cards that make your opponent sacrifice, and a whole heap more. Because it says sacrifice a permanent, that means anything. So that even stretches to those classics like Harrow, Pitiless Plunder, and all those other commander staples. Here is where I'm going to throw in the always prestigious Gathering the Magic Card of the Deck award, and this time is going to Tergrid, God of Fright. This menacing god from Kaldheim is perfect in a pro-sacrifice deck. Make sure that whenever your opponents are sacrificing those permanents, they're hitting the field under your control. Lastly, stretch out this sacrifice deck with all those lands that love that sacrifice, and you'll have options at every avenue for that sacrificial slaughter. This is an incredible card and really opens your eyes up to how much pro-sacrifice there is in Magic. What a commander. Next on the list we have Skullbriar, the Walking Grave. Skullbriar is a 1/1 zombie elemental with haste that says whenever Skullbriar deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. The big kicker is that counters remain on Skullbriar even if it's sent back to the command zone. So step 1 of this plan is to go Voltron. Equip all that hurty goodness that will strengthen Skullbriar and give him all that extra chance of getting that combat damage through. And step 2 is get in all those cards that will give Skullbriar even more +1/+1 counters. Don't just leave it to combat damage, any +1 counters stay on Skullbriar, so why not get in loads of those ways to boost up Skullbriar. Lastly, as we love to do here, protect Skullbriar to the max. Give him a few options that will protect and keep him on the field for as long as possible. Skullbriar is such a cheap commander to play at 1 green and 1 black that you won't even mind bringing him out of the command zone multiple times, as he'll hopefully by then be super powerful. Next up we have Jarad, Golgari Lichlord. Jarad is a 2/2 zombie elf that gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. He also gives you the option to pay 3 and sack a creature, and each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. And finally, he allows you to sack an island and a swamp and return him from the graveyard to your hand. So instantly get in all those mill-loving cards, because the more you fill your graveyard with those creatures, the more you'll beef up Jarad. There's plenty of cards from new sets that will help fill up that graveyard too. The good thing about Jarad is how varied a deck of his could be. If you really fancied it, go Zombie Tribal, and if that's not for you, then you could always go the scary Elf Tribal. Or once again, as is common in Golgari, add in all those sack-loving cards and give even more options to get stuff in your graveyard. Just make sure you've got that Lord of Extinction in your deck. The more you sack, the bigger that boy gets.
Phrasing. Shut up!
For the 5th best Golgari commander we have Herpatra, Vizier of Poisons. From Amonkhet, this 2/2 human cleric is all about that poison. Whenever Herpatra deals combat damage to a player, place a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and whenever you put one or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, you create a 1/1 snake creature token with Death Touch. So here we're putting that heavy focus on -1/-1 counters, and in Golgari there are so many of them at your disposal. This ranges across enchantments, creatures, sorceries, and even lands, which is just amazing. You can even add in cards from new sets like Finn and even more to double down on those counters and draw you some cards when that combat damage goes through. Speaking of combat damage, the key part to this deck is really making sure that that damage goes through, so make sure you have a couple of ways in that deck to make Herpatra unblockable or get her to a strength where you know that damage will definitely go through. Finally, getting all those proliferate cards, because why just have one -1/-1 counter on a creature when you could crank that up to a -2/-2 and more. This is an amazingly poisonous deck that I'm very surprised one of my infect loving friends hasn't already built a deck around yet. Maybe I've made a mistake highlighting Herpatra here.
You know what? Forget I said anything.
Just missing out on the top 3 we have Hogak, a Risen Necropolis. Probably my favourite card on this list. Hogak is an 8/8 avatar with trample. Whilst you can't spend mana to cast this spell, you can convoke or delve to get Hogak onto the field. Another commander with many different ways to build around. Maybe you want to fill your deck with all those tokens so you can use them to convoke on later on. The other option is the always popular Mill Your Heart Out. The more stuff in that graveyard, the more you can delve to get Hogak onto the field. The best part is that if he dies, you can choose to keep him in your graveyard rather than the command zone, and then you avoid the ever increasing command attacks. And if you're making Hogak, you better be sneaking in that spider spawning. Create a million little spiders, and then you've got them as that option to convoke with if you need to get Hogak back. Hogak is not only a cool commander, but one that is super unique and definitely on my list of future commanders. Next on the list we have Lathril, Blade of Elves. This Kaldheim 2/3 Elf Noble has Menace and says whenever Lathril deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. So for part 1 of this deck, you want to get Lathril as strong as possible. The stronger she is, the more damage you can do and the more elves you can create. Beef her up with various equipment and give her trample, so even if your opponents have 2 creatures they could block with, the damage could still get through. Part 2 is really to focus on that elf tribal. Stick in the millions of elves available in MTG, the elves that boost other elves, the elves that gives your elves Death Touch, the elves that give you mana, and all of the rest of them. As I've said in a previous top 10 list, elves are a tribe that is one of the strongest going in all of MTG, and something that makes Lathril a force to be reckoned with. Especially with that final option Lathril has to tap 10 elves and drain your opponents for 10 life and give you 10 life. That is spicy. Runner up and the second best Golgari commander is the Gitrog monster. Old Gitty is a 6/6 frog horror creature with Death Touch that says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice him unless you sack a land. However, Gitrog allows you to play an extra land a turn, and whenever one or more lands are placed into a graveyard, you can draw a card. First off, make sure you have a couple of options in your deck where you can either get those lands back out of your graveyard or play straight from your graveyard, because if you're losing them in your graveyard, you may as well find future ways to use them. I think I said graveyard a bit too much there. Secondly, there is a variety of black and green lands to run in a deck like this, some with ETB abilities and some like the classic fetch lands, which again would be perfect to sack, fetch out a land and draw a card with Gitrog's ability. Then those lands hopefully you can bring back with some of those ways we mentioned a few moments ago. Again, with Gitrog there are many ways to go. Add into your deck all the many ways to play multiple lands a turn, get in all of those landfall loving cards as land is the name of the game with Gitrog, or just come at your opponents like Thor's hammer and beef up Gitrog and smash everyone in the face. An amazing commander option and a card I pulled in one of my mystery booster boxes a few months ago. And if you've not seen that, I absolutely recommend watching that video. After this video, of course. Winner and the best Golgari commander in MTG is Meren of Clan Nel Toth. This human shaman is a 3/4 that says whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. And at the beginning of your end step, you choose a target creature from your graveyard. If that card's CMC is less or equal to the number of experience counters on Meren, you can return it to the battlefield, or, if not, pop it straight into your hand. Absolute recursion madness. Another Golgari commander that lets you go a million different ways with it Maybe you want to go down that sack route and sack all the creatures to get more experience counters. Maybe you want a butt ton of milling cards in there so you can get those huge creatures nice and easy from your graveyard instead of having to play them from your hand. Maybe you just want to keep bringing back Spore Frog to make your defense impenetrable. Or maybe you want to go the pod route, sack those creatures to get even more creatures, then use Merrin's ability to bring back that original creature. This really is one of the most powerful commander options, not only in Golgari, but in all of MTG, and understandably why this was the most popular pick amongst all of our followers on Instagram. Merrin, you are one hell of a commander, and yes, you guessed it, a commander I'd like to build my own deck around one day. I have never said that before.
You said that already!
There we have it, that is the list. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description for all our social media and affiliate links. But for now, I'm all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.